If you're weighing up the options between buy-to-lets versus houses of multiple occupations, here's the real question. Which one actually builds wealth and which one just ticks along? In this video, we're breaking down 7 key criteria from cash flow to ROI to income streams and losing it all if one tenant leaves. Just a fair comparison, and by the end, you'll be able to connect the dots for yourself. So the first criteria is cash flow. So with a standard buy-to-let, you can generally see about £200 to £400 per month. When you get your rent paid minus your mortgage payments, you are left over with £200 to £400 profit per month from your single buy-to-let. With HMOs, you can see anywhere upwards of £1,000 to £1,500 a month. So you can see here a much larger cash flow from a single property, almost 5x what you get from a buy-to-let. So a no-brainer when it comes to comparing HMOs versus buy-to-let. It's a clear winner in terms of cash flow on this one. HMO way outperforms a buy-to-let when it comes to cash flow. So the next criteria is return on investment and buy, refurbish, refinance potential when it comes to buy-to-let versus HMOs. So when it comes to buy-to-lets, generally you're going to see a 5-10% ROI. Often your capital's locked in. So when I say locked in, I mean when you put a deposit down for this property to buy the property, that money's tied, and the only way you're able to recycle money in that property, generally speaking, is from the rental income you achieve from the property. So either net cash flow. So if you're making £200 to £400 and you put 50k, let's say, into this buy-to-let, for example, it's going to take a very long time to recoup back your initial investment. I know some people might argue you can do a buy, refurbish, refinance model on a buy-to-let, but even still, the returns are still low in comparison to HMOs. So HMOs, generally speaking, you can see a 20% return on investment when it comes to this, and just very simply because you're going into this and you're looking to develop the property from what it was, i.e. a house, into multiple units where you're going to then rent it out. So generally you can see a bare minimum, I would like to say, a 20% ROI on your money invested into the property to turn this house into a HMO. And so a much larger, again, ROI position compared to your 5-10%, almost double, depending on what you're looking at, even 3-4 times your return on investment with a HMO versus a buy-to-let. So again, another clear winner when it comes to BR HMOs and it providing a better return on investment. Just very simply as well, because you can recycle the capital. In this case, for you to convert a house into a HMO, there's going to be, a cost required to be able to allow you to convert this house, which leads us nicely onto the next criteria. So what's the setup cost for setting up a buy-to-let versus a HMO? So again, this varies, right, depending where you are and what you're doing. Generally speaking, with buy-to-lets, there might be some element of like cosmetic refurbs to basically get it up to speed to be able to rent it out. So nothing major, between 5 to 15k, generally speaking, to kind of get the buy-to-let up and running. In some cases, you might have bought a good-to-go brand new property and therefore can literally, the minute you get the keys, rent out straight without doing any single thing to it. But like I said, on average, if you're buying a house maybe dated a little bit, you might want to freshen it up with new carpets, new painted walls, all that kind of stuff. And that's generally between a 5 to 15k cost to get a buy-to-let running. On the HMO side of things, you can see anywhere between 50k upwards. The cost for your HMO is going to be higher because you're going to have to refurb the property. There's licensing involved, fire safety, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot more required on the HMO front. But again, like I said, it just depends. It's kind of a subjective thing because depending on what you're buying, there might be costs. It could be even cost on both side of things. Generally speaking, I would say more on the HMO side is definitely going to be more costs on the HMO side of things. All right, so the next criteria is management time. So how time intensive is it to manage a buy-to-let versus a HMO? For a lot of people that are doing buy-to-lets, they are usually going to try and manage and self-manage themselves, or either just pay the agent to find them the tenants and vet the tenants correctly. Some might even do the tenants find it themselves. If they're capable and if they can find the tenants, they'll find the tenants for themselves and save the cost of having an agency kind of vet tenants and place the tenants for their buy-to-lets. So as you imagine, buy-to-lets, if you are the one managing it, then the tenant has every right to contact you with any issues, and you'll be the first point of contact, and you'll be chasing them for rent. Everything, that's all on you as an individual to be able to go and collect your rent and make sure that the upkeep of the properties is being maintained. For me, that's very hands-on. And yes, with buy-to-lets, you generally probably won't hear from your tenants as much because people that usually rent those houses are families and they're going to treat the home like it's their home. So they're going to look after the house, generally speaking, assuming you've got the right tenants in there, right? Never say never when it comes to getting bad tenants, because that's possible, right? And that comes down to the vetting. From a management time perspective, it's maybe minimal, but it's a direct contact from yourself. Most people won't try and get a land agent in place because the cost probably won't make sense for them to have that in, especially when the margins already are super low as it is. To then give away £50 to £100 a month to manage your tenants tenants, again, it's eating into their profits. They're going to think, well, there's barely any need of maintenance month on month, so it's better for them to kind of deal with it the 1 or 2 occasions that they have to deal with it. So it's just cheaper for them to maintain it that way. Every right to contact you with any issues, and you'll be the first point of contact, and you'll be chasing them for rent. Everything, that's all on you as an individual to be able to go and collect your rent and make sure that the upkeep of the properties is being maintained. For me, that's very hands-on. From a management time perspective, it's maybe minimal, but it's a direct contact from yourself. Most people won't try and get a letting agent in place because the costs probably won't make sense for them to have that in, especially when the margins already are super low as it is. To then give away £50 to £100 a month to manage your tenants, again, it's eating into their profits. With HMOs, obviously, as you can imagine, there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tenants in a house. Generally speaking, people who have got HMOs will get a management in place. It will be very silly of you to try and manage this individually. You've got 6, 7, 8 tenants potentially at any given point messaging you about anything. Could be they've lost their keys, they could have something's not working in the house, the heating, hot tap is not working, something, just anything. You want to ideally get a management in place, and generally speaking, that's about 10% of your rental income. They'll charge in upwards 10% plus, maybe 10 to 15% is kind of the range in which you'd kind of expect an average agent in the country to charge you to manage this. And at this point, it does make sense to outsource this to your letting agent because there is margin, there's enough profit in the deal to take away that responsibility of having to manage tenants from day to day. Personally, I would value not having the one-to-one interactions with the tenants and having it outsourced to agent. And so from that perspective, I would say that the HMOs for me allows me to be able to pass on to the agents because I can afford to pay an agent. There's enough meat on the bone, i.e. enough cash flow coming in for me to allow me to pass on to agent rather than dealing with it day to day. And yes, there might be an odd occasion where the agents are going to come to you, but again, if you've got system and processes in place to allow this, then you shouldn't be getting involved. You're paying them the 10-15% of your rent for them to deal with all the maintenance, anything that's like the certificates, anything that needs updating, whatever need, like the upkeep, the inventory, the letting of the property, changeover of tenants, everything. That's their job. That's what they're making 10% for. And if they're not doing that, then it's like, why are you paying them in a sense? So from a time perspective, there should be very minimal time required from yourself. There'll be time obviously between the tenant and the agent, but not directly with you. For me, I would argue that the time dealing with your agent versus if I was to have a buy-to-let and dealing with my tenant is probably equal, because it shouldn't be much for you to do if you've set up. And again, the caveat here is if you've set it up correctly, you shouldn't be getting involved in the day-to-day nitty-gritty of your HMOs. From a time perspective, there should be very minimal time required from yourself. There'll be time obviously between the tenant and the agent, but not directly with you. You should have very minimal time spent managing your portfolio. It should be over to the agents and then manage that out. So again, I would say it's an even split on that one, just depends on how you structure it. So the next criteria we want to discuss is the risk and regulations when it comes to buy-to-let versus HMOs. So with buy-to-lets, there's very little regulations around that. There's very little inspections required. It's not as stringent as the HMOs. HMOs have a lot more regulations around that to ensure that you are managing the property correctly. You've got the right fire safety stuff within the property. Whereas a buy-to-let, all these restrictions and stuff isn't required. All the simple compliance when it comes to buy-to-lets has a lower barrier to entry for anyone coming into the market, because it's very easy. You can get a house and get a house rented. There's no real compliance around buy-to-lets versus HMOs. So HMOs is licensing you have to get in place. Sometimes you have to go through planning to even get the number of occupants in the house to a certain level if you're trying to go past 6 people in the house. All these factors come into it. The fire safety when it comes to HMOs, fire doors, sizes of rooms, amenity space. There's a lot more to it when it comes to HMOs. So for simplicity, buy-to-lets is definitely more straightforward than it is with HMOs. So the 6th criteria is income streams. Well, from a single buy-to-let, obviously you have to imagine it's one single tenant, single family, single occupant property. There's one income stream coming from that property. Versus a HMO, these are multiple occupants. As you can imagine, you've got multiple tenants in there, and this could be upwards of 5, 6, 7, 8, however many numbers you've got people in that property. So definitely have a lot more income streams coming from that property than you would a single buy-to-let. So again, depending on what you want, if you're wanting multiple incomes, obviously HMO is more favorable, and if you're wanting a single income from a single property, then obviously buy-to-let is the more favorable one. So the 7th criteria is what's the risk of income going to zero. So when it comes to buy-to-let, you've obviously got a single tenant who's paying that one income, right? So if they stopped paying you for whatever reason and became a non-paying tenant for whatever reason, then you are down to zero straight away. Like you've gone from 100% income to 0% income straight away. So it's higher risk from that perspective of a non-paying tenant and you having to still pay the mortgages, because again, the mortgages are going to be still exist, right? Regardless of a non-paying tenant being in your property, or even if someone that's maybe damaged your property, you can't get rid of them, because unfortunately tenants do have a lot of rights these days. You can't just kick a tenant out because they're non-paying or they're damaging your property. You have to go through the court process to get them out of the property, and unfortunately it's not the quickest of things. So you'd have to weather 6-7 months, a year even of unknown of like when this person can leave the property, even if you win the case in the courts as well. So there's this uncertainty of having that one tenant in that property who becomes non-paying and is like, what do I do next, right? Versus a HMO, you've got multiple tenants in there. So again, upwards of 5, 6, 7, 8 tenants in that property. It still provides your income, which still covers your mortgage, your bills, and still has some level of profit, right? If the profit will reduce if one of the rooms are being empty, but at least you're not at zero compared to buy-to-let, where like, yeah, at least your profit goes to zero because you're having to cover the mortgage on top. So with HMOs, you probably have to lose let's say 6 rooms, you have to lose 2 or 3 of those rooms to be at a point where you're break even, where you're not making no money, but your mortgages are being covered. So having multiple tenants is going to obviously mitigate the risk of having a non-paying tenant who's not paying rent for whatever reason, or even as a void, for example. If you've got a void, which can happen in HMOs, then you still got tenants that are paying you and still making money from that property, and you're not taking money in your pocket to keep up with the mortgages or keeping up with the bills. So you look at the 7 criteria and you're comparing the buy-to-let versus HMO. It's very clear which one comes up on top. Yes, HMOs require you to do more work, but again, if you want greater things out of life, it requires more work, unfortunately, sometimes. And in this case, it's proven to be the more beneficial strategy in terms of creating wealth, higher cash flow, better return on investment, being able to recycle capital. There's no right or wrong, it's just what's your preference. And so if you're looking to create more wealth and have financial freedom, be able to reinvest your money multiple times across multiple deals, then HMO is definitely the route you want to go down and explore. But guys, I hope that's been great value for yourself to help you decide between buy-to-let versus HMOs. And yeah, guys, see you in the next video.